7. I was so sleep deprived too that I just wasn't thinking straight. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have answered the door so late at night. But anyway, as I was heading to get to the door, my baby started to wake up, so I brought him with me. I opened the door and a man is standing there. I said, "How can I help you?" And he just sort of stands there for a second and doesn't say anything. At this point, I'm starting to wake up enough to be observant, and I remember feeling like he seemed nervous, which made me anxious too. All he said was,
"Pause it. Let's head home. You know the usual routine. Tomorrow's just another day." Yo! God, that hurt. I'm hoping I'm going the right way. My house is over here, I'm hoping. Just look under me. Okay, good. No. That's not my house over there. My house is that way, yo. Well, shit. Excuse me, scrolls. Right, oh, 2 hours. Okay. Excuse me, fellow dogs. Tomorrow is just another day. Excuse me. It's another day in the morning, yo. Hoping I have to go the wrong way. What? I'm hoping this is the right way. I have to have been the, you know what I mean, shit. This has to be the right way. Not this neighborhood. I think my house, my neighborhood is down this way, hopefully. I forgot. How can I forget where I live? For fuck's sake. I keep on forgetting and forgetting. This is not my house. Or is it my house? No. Definitely not my place. Definitely not. I'm hoping my neighbors won't mind me cutting through. If they do mind, too bad. Here we are. Head upstairs. You know. See you guys in the morning, I guess. Well, it's another day. Let's go chill out here. Press play, yo.
"I'm sorry, I thought you ordered a pizza."
Her bond
Then he
for a
grabbed the
day.
box off of the table on the porch and walked away. I don't remember what I even said to him, to be honest. I just closed the door and stood there feeling a bit strange, thinking about how weird it was, but I told myself that he just had the wrong house, I think. As I'm walking back to the living room, I saw the clock, and it was at this point that my stomach dropped. It was a little over 2 a.m. There were no...
Oh, My other sister just texted me, said she's outside. Cool. Princess Rey, her name is. Princess Rey Skywalker.
Hi.
Hey, come in.
Cool.
Close the door after you.
Got it.
Cool. Let's get you upstairs, yo. Actually, can you put on a pizza for me? I'm hungry.
Sure thing, I'll meet you upstairs.
Cool, thanks. Okay. Press play, yo.
No places around that deliver that late. I went back to look outside, but I didn't see anyone. There were no cars on the street. I made sure all the doors were locked, along with the windows that night. I just remember sitting there a little shaken, thinking about how off the situation felt. I mean, one, normally a pizza guy just says, the only place nearby was a pizza hut as well. And this was around March or April, so it's possible he had a jacket on, I suppose, but I just don't remember. And four, nothing was open that late, and I'm definitely sure about that. But the nervous vibe that I got from him too still tells me that something was really off that night. I mean, what was he doing? And if he did have bad intentions, I think either he saw that I had dogs, or maybe me holding my baby changed his mind. Whenever I think about it, though, I still get chills and feel lucky that nothing happened that night. This happened about 8 years ago at my local supermarket. I, female, 36 at the time, am in the queue to pay. It's a Saturday morning, super busy, and I'm second in line. In front of me at the till is a family of three, Mum, Dad, and daughter. Mum and Dad are unpacking the trolley, and the daughter is sitting in the trolley just facing me. Behind me are two men, and they just make me super uncomfortable, standing way too close to me. You know how you can sort of feel someone before you see them? Well, it was a lot like that. I was facing the daughter, and she looked super uncomfortable too, making herself smaller and kept
Tell them how you are,
to her
sis.
dad. I turn around, and these men are waving and smiling, trying to get her attention.
You over here is
And
up.
one guy reaches around me and touches her foot.
Goddamn right,
He
Princess
did it in such a
Leia.
familiar way too that I thought that he must know the family.
Princess Leia
She
Skywalker,
flinched away
sister.
though, and he does
Oh,
it
no.
again. She quietly says, "Daddy." Dad swings around and says in a booming voice something along the lines of, "What are you doing?
Your fat
Don't
ass
touch my daughter."
vintage.
This
I know,
weirdo is
brother.
like, "But we want to be friends."
Goddamn
Dad
right.
is like, "I don't know you, back off." I realize then that they don't know each other at all. Back to unpacking the trolley, and I position myself between the two guys and the daughter, completely
Let me
blocking
fuck.
access.
Can you get in
Believe it
touch
or
with
not,
me?
too,
And
he tries
present
to
me?
get her attention again.
Attracted
I
to
say
my
really loudly,
your
"You're so lucky that you have such a
other
brave
younger
and strong
sister?
daddy. Look how he's protecting you from these bad
And your
men."
mum?
The dad looks at
So
me,
is
and
sis.
we have a sort of silent
Thanks.
conversation
Love you,
with
daddy,
our eyes,
brother.
and they
Love
pack
you
up
too,
and
sis.
leave quickly. I thought that it was over. The girl was safe, and as I'm unpacking my trolley, I suddenly notice that one of the men has moved around and is standing at the end of the till, where you pack your groceries into the bags, staring at me with just what I can only describe as pure malice. The other guy is still standing behind me in the queue,
I'm gonna go check it.
my trolley between us.
Oh, good. She shouldn't have.
I felt
Is it
intimidated,
ready? Yeah.
terrified,
Here you go.
Cool, let's eat.
to avoid her.
God damn, you know
Just
how
as we
cool.
started to pass her,
Thank you, baby
she
daddy,
suddenly
brother.
screamed
You're welcome,
and just
sis.
rushed at us from the middle of the road. Her mouth was wide open as she charged at us, just shrieking. We stepped quickly
Good
apart,
blonde.
and her abrupt rush took her straight between us, just shriek wailing that horrible sound. It sounded like it would hurt her throat, to be honest. Banshee-like is the only word that I have for it. But we were several feet apart, both braced for her to come back and do something, but instead she just veered again and went down the sidewalk the way that she had originally been going. As she walked away, she kept looking back at us and keeping up short bursts of the shrieking banshee noises, stopping to take breaths. As she got further away from us, she started caw barking at us again, and we just stood there for a while, silently watching until she was a good long ways off down the sidewalk with her very strange crow barks fading into the distance. To this day, I still have no idea what was wrong with that lady. Did our lights somehow trigger an episode? I don't know, but I hope she's okay. She seemed to know where she was going, so we didn't follow her or do much about it. And man, that was a freaky night, that's for sure. This story starts when I was in middle school. I met this guy his name was Chase, and Chase was the new kid in my 7th grade English class. He looked like a typical skater, sort of BMX type kid. Long, floppy, Justin Bieber style hair, and wore shirts and hats that had the monster logo on them. Insert Kyle meme reference. But for the first week or so, we didn't really talk or interact with each other. At lunch, I would always see him just eating alone in the cafeteria. I would just watch him sometimes. His mannerisms and things that he would do were just intriguing to me for some reason. One day, though, I was coming out of the bathroom when I see him harassing some 6th grade girl and trying to get her to make out with him. In my stupid, naive 7th grader brain, it didn't really register to me that what he was doing was really wrong. I actually thought that he was cool for doing it. I know, stupid. But he looked over at me, smiled, and then walked away after the girl walked back into her classroom. The next day in my English class was when we first began interacting with each other too. I had to do a book report on Of Mice and Men. When he saw me reading the book, he gave me his notes and told me to just copy his work, but change it up a bit so as to not make it obvious that I'd copied him. He said that the reading was really boring and that he just skimmed through the plot of the book and movie on Wikipedia instead of actually reading the book. I thanked him and was genuinely thankful, as I too didn't like reading, and I actually love that book now, but anyway, that's another story. Eventually, though, we would start hanging out outside of class and would have lunch together outside in the quad. He told me that he was interested in riding BMX bikes and motocross, so my earlier assessment of him was right, I suppose. I wasn't really into that stuff, so I just nodded my head and tried to act like I was genuinely interested in what he was saying. The whole time he'd talk, I just admire him for some reason, but I'm not gay or anything, for the record. Never have been attracted to dudes, so it was really weird being so drawn to him the way that I was, I suppose. Anyway, we started hanging out after school. He would come over my house, and at this point he had completely won my mother over. He would always compliment her on the way that she had the house decorated. He would compliment her cooking and would talk to her about the show Teen Mum 2, which my mum really liked to watch, and apparently so did Chase. Over time, I started going over to his house too. I wasn't as outgoing as he was, so I didn't immediately hit it off with his family, but they were nice people and I really liked them. Chase would always argue with his mum though, and one time she told him and I to go outside and hang out because she didn't want us playing Grand Theft Auto all day. This seemed to really tick Chase off too, and he turned around and hurled the controller at her, cracking her right in the forehead. I was obviously sent home, and as I was walking down the driveway, I could hear him screaming at his mother and calling her all kinds of horrible things that I won't even repeat here. The next day at school, he walked up to me at my locker and apologized for what happened at his house. I asked him if his mum was alright after being hit with the controller, and he said that she ended up going to the ER to get stitches. He then said, too bad I had to do that just to get her to shut up. As more and more time progressed, I had started spending more and more time at his house. His attitude towards me started to change too. He would ridicule me for the clothes that I would wear. I always wore black band t-shirts, and he would call me names, like, every day. One night, when I was spending the night at his house, he said that he wanted to play a game. The game was just called Hide and Seek Tag in the Dark, and apparently he was it. So the The first round, we turn off all the lights
You
in the
don't know
house,
what
and
to hang
I
around
hide
with
while
that.
he counted. Keep in mind, this was his idea, not mine. I thought that it was weird that we were even playing this, given our ages at the time. Nevertheless, I find a hiding spot in the crawl space under the staircase, and I wait patiently. The house was pitch black and completely dead silent, and let me tell you that the atmosphere in the house was something straight out of a horror movie. I felt extremely uneasy, and the hairs on my arms started to stand up. I really couldn't hear a thing in that house, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear this creepy laugh coming from outside the crawl space door. The door was cracked open, and I could see Chase peeking in. He says in a low whisper, "You're screwed now," before yanking the door open and opening fire. A barrage of BBS are flying at me at once, and I didn't know that there were BBS in the moment, so I literally thought that I was being shot with actual bullets. The popping sound resembled an actual gun too, and he had emptied an entire magazine into me, and I was in so much pain that I just couldn't even move. But once the pain subsided, I just left though without saying another word to him. At school, he would stare at me and follow me to all my classes. He would try to call me and text me, but I would always ignore him. Eventually, he left me alone.
Fit on
A
acting.
few years went by before I heard about him again through a mutual friend. And supposedly,
He's
he'd
in
gone on the run
jail now.
after shooting his girlfriend in the head because she wouldn't let him have the last cigarette. He hasn't been seen or heard from since, and to this day, his whereabouts are actually unknown.
Hopefully
His
that dude is in
ex-girlfriend
jail.
survived and thankfully made a full recovery as well. But I just find it so unsettling to think about how I was best friends with such a psychotic person. This experience is from November of 2018. I'd been working at this facility for 2 years at this time. For context, I'll try to describe what our floors look like in the jail. There's an elevator bay with a big metal door that is controlled by motor and chain. This is what we call main slider, and all traffic comes into the floor from this door. You go down a small passage and then you're in a space that is sort of the shape of a square with a small square room inside, called the cube, which is surrounded by 7 pods for inmates, and each pod has 12 cells and can fit 2 inmates. The cube is used for controlling doors and basically is an office space where paperwork can be filled out, and where you can sit and watch the pods during your shift. I am assigned night shift on a floor of non-violent inmates, Gen Pop. Typical inmate that you'd find on this floor would be, I suppose, drug users, dealers, petty theft, and the occasional drunkard kind of deal. And I was working this floor by myself, and the night was starting off as usual. As I show up, I lock down all the pods for the night, conduct my head count, and go back to the cube. An hour later, I conduct my hourly block check. Everybody's asleep or just chilling, so I return to the cube. And not the second that I finish sitting down, I hear the sound of someone kicking a cell door. I get up, I start flashing my light through the pods, and eventually narrow it down to B-Pod 6 cell. One inmate is frantic, screaming that his cellmate is coughing up blood and is shaking. I open the door, remove the inmate, and see that his cellmate is foaming from his mouth and is performing what is known as agonal breathing. Essentially, we are listening to him take his final breaths. Long story short, medical gets called and he eventually is taken to the hospital, but
He died.
doesn't make it to the hospital and he's declared dead en route. And I come to find out the inmate had swallowed some drugs before he was booked, and one of the packages ruptured while he was in the jail. It was unfortunate, yes, but it's not the first time it's happened, and surely won't be the last, and so I file my paperwork and continue about life as normal. As another thing for context too, we have cameras in the individual cell blocks and the cells, and we went back and watched the footage of the incident to confirm there wasn't any kind of assault or general roughhousing that would have caused the package to rupture. The next night too,
I wonder,
inside the same floor, similar
since
process comes and goes.
cameras
Show
in the cells,
pods, conduct count.
what would
something
happen
like that.
if you get,
An hour goes
if you
by and
caught,
I do my standard check and I go back
you
to
know,
the cube. And again as I go to sit, I hear 3 loud bangs
Would
coming
they
from what
turn off
sounds
the
like deep
camera,
underground.
or would they...
I go in and I flash my light.
Most likely turn off the camera.
When it's sleeping or chilling. I return to the
I
cube.
hope so, they turn off the
3
camera.
more bangs this time.
They see a person.
I refer to my touchscreen
Yeah.
to see if the kicking is tripping the lock sensor in the door or something.
You know what I mean.
Sure enough, B-Pod 6 cell is showing that it's being messed with. But the cell was still locked down due to the events of the night before. So that meant no inmate should have been in that cell. I go to the cell, open it, and double check to make sure nothing and no one is in that cell. And sure enough, nobody's in it. My next thought is that the lock is malfunctioning or something, so I exit the cell and walk to the cube to call for maintenance. And as I'm on the phone, the door slams shut, which sends me back out to look. And at this point, I'm just at a loss for words and have no clue what to do. All the inmates of the pod are also trying to figure out what's going on in their pod. I'm trying to answer their questions, but genuinely I have no clue what to tell them. It eventually goes quiet. Maintenance arrives. I have them check the lock. And there's nothing in terms of it being a mechanical malfunction. After that night, I asked my watch supervisor to be placed on a different floor, which, at the time, we had just got a new batch of rookies in, so he gave me a choice of the floors. I've been on my new floor for a little over 2 years now, and I still have things happen that I can't explain, such as audible footsteps from around the cube, the occasional tapping on the glass of the door to the cube itself. But nothing as drastic as that night in 2018, which I will never forget. About 20 years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I worked as a window coverings installer in Sacramento, California. One day, I was sent with a large load of metal mini blinds to an active veterans hospital off Highway 50. I met the lead maintenance man, who thankfully loaned me a rolling cart to help make transporting my materials and tools a much easier chore. He then led me into the building through a maze of corridors and up a large service elevator. As we exited the elevator, I was pleasantly greeted with a completely empty hospital wing. I was really happy to see that I had the entire floor to myself. No patients, staff, or furniture to constrain my mission. I could work quickly without obstruction or distraction. The maintenance man explained how they just completed some seismic retrofits while pointing to some newly constructed drywall columns that concealed the brunt of their work. He said that they took that opportunity to make cosmetic repairs, install new blinds, and give the place a much-needed paint job. He then showed me a typical patient room and said that there should be 1 blind for every window on the floor. He told me that he would lead me to it and to give him a call if I needed anything, or when I was ready to leave. The last thing that he said, in a sort of concerned fatherly voice before entering the elevator, was, "You sure you're going to be alright up here?" I responded, "Yeah, man, absolutely," in my best and confident young man's voice. With a departing handshake, he entered the elevator cab, but for some reason his question and his tone oddly hung with me as the doors closed, and the whirl of the old elevator faded into a deafening silence. It was at that moment that I was truly able to take in my surroundings. With the elevator to my back, I scanned the hospital wing in a clockwise direction, and I was standing in the middle of a long and rectangular room. Light and airy patient rooms filled the perimeter of the open room to my left. As I scanned right, the light quickly faded to an inky, opaque blackness that disappeared into a dark U-shaped corridor, which, after a short distance, made a sharp right and another sharp right to end up back where I started. Despite the new paint, too, the place looked like it exited a time machine circa 1950 or something, with those pea-green ceramic walls and matching asbestos vinyl floor tiles. It was at that moment that I realized that this place was really creepy. But enough of that. I had a job to do, and I got right to work. But first things first, I walked the entire perimeter to get a quick survey of where things were located, popping my head into each room as I passed. As I got to the dark hallway, my sudden bravery waned a bit. the lack of light, I presume there must not have been any windows to address, but I pushed on nevertheless to be thorough. As the dark engulfed me, it felt like all of a sudden someone plugged me into an electrical socket. I had never before or since felt the energy that surged my body and immediately picked up my pace. And up behind him and apparently growled at him. We joked around a bit to ease the tension, and then he left me alone once again. The rest of the day was surprisingly uneventful, to be honest. Things seemed to have calmed down, and I felt more calm. I do remember, though, never feeling more relieved to leave a place behind, but also being completely exhausted that afternoon and crashing out to sleep early that evening. And to this day, this remains the strangest experience of my life to date. When I was young, I used to be one of the world's biggest chickens, really. I come from Arizona, and spooky lore is something that comes with the territory. When I was around 11, we had moved to Kern County. The house we lived in was used by a mortuary for wakes and to keep bodies prior to burying, and when we first moved in the place, it really creeped me out. It made a lot of noise, which was unusual for a home that wasn't really that old. Anyway, I was a big reader of Fate magazine when I was young, and that was fuel for the fire for my overactive imagination. But I never really saw anything in that house, I think. I only really heard noises, like people walking across the wooden floors. There were nights when I couldn't sleep because of it as well. And to make matters worse, my mum would always hold seances with all of my older sister's friends, and everyone would get really scared because of them. And one night, there was a carnival in town. I had gone there with my friend Pete. My sister went with her friend, and my mum had taken my younger sister, who was still in a stroller. Pete and I left to go home at some point, though, and Pete walked me to my house. We said our goodbyes, and then he left. I would never go directly into the house, though, because I knew where the light switch was, and I would reach in with my arm and turn on the living room and the dining room lights before entering the house every time. Once I did this, those two rooms checked out okay, so I went into the kitchen and then down the hallway to my mum's room. Mum wasn't in her room, so I went to my sister Kathy's room. When I went there too, I could see from the hall light that she was in bed and under the covers. But weirdly, she was breathing really heavily, like in a really deep sleep or something. I didn't want to turn on her lights and wake her up though, so I tiptoed in and checked the locks on her windows. They were locked, and so I made my way to my room, and as usual, I took off my clothes and jumped into bed. I didn't turn on my room lights since I had the hall lights and the front room lights on, and I felt safe because Kathy was home and I started falling asleep. Now, as I was almost asleep, I heard my mum come in with my younger sister. She went directly into the kitchen, and I could hear her getting my sister's bottles ready. She walked into my room and asked if Kathy was home, and I said yes, so she went back into the kitchen. I have to point out, too, that if you even so much as fart in this house, the floors creak, so no one could get up and walk around without it being heard. So I was just dozing off when my mum came in, and man, was she angry. She asked me, "Where's Kathy?" I told her that she was in bed, and my mum got more mad. She said to me, "Kathy isn't in bed. Are you lying for Kathy so she can stay out late?" I said, "Mum, Kathy is in bed. When I came home, I went into her room and she was asleep under the covers and had the covers pulled over her head. I could hear her breathing really heavily." Mum got more mad and said, "Show me." I walked into my sister's room. My mum had the light on already in there. I looked at the bed, and I did. It was untouched, like no one had even sat on it. I ran over to the windows to check the locks, and they were locked, and because they were locked from the inside, there's no way that she could have gotten out and relocked the windows like that. Mum said, "Well, where is she?" I just pointed at the bed horrified and said, "You guys, you're playing a joke on me, aren't you? To which my mum responded, "I'll show you a joke." And that went directly to my butt cheeks. During this period, Kathy got home and was read the riot act. But I stopped my mum and I told her, and Kathy, "Look, there was something sleeping in Kathy's bed. That's why I thought it was her, and that's why I told you that it was her. I could see the bed moving up and down from the breathing even. There was something in her bed, and it wasn't her since she only just walked in, and I don't know. I don't want to sleep here tonight, okay?" Ghost or not, I had to stay in my room that night. Kathy opted for the couch, and my mum still wasn't buying my story. But whatever was in that room and that bed, I can tell you that I know for sure it was breathing. It had the appearance of a human body shape, and it's taken about 5 years off of my life, I think. The story takes place in a very small town in the Mexican woodland area, where everyone's houses had their own land for farming, animals, etc. It was back before the 1950s, and a relative had suddenly and mysteriously passed away, and this shocked the family since it was unexpected, because the person showed zero sign of ever even being sick. So, the next day they had the funeral and buried him in the backyard. But something about the houses too in my family's town is that since they still had the old-fashioned outhouses, these outhouses would not be connected to the house. You would have to walk at least like 20 to 40 meters away from the house to use them. Now, late in the evening, the same day as the funeral, my mum's great aunt, who was a little girl at the time, needed to use the restroom. So she walked herself to use it, and as she was walking near where they buried her uncle, she heard pounding and screaming coming from an unknown area. If you don't know about Mexican folklore, there's this legend of La Llorona, the crying lady, which everyone is desperately afraid of. My mum's great aunt, upon hearing this, ran back inside the house and woke up her mum and dad. They brushed her off and told her to just go back to sleep. As she was trying to fall back to sleep, though, her mind kept on playing tricks on her as she kept on hearing the screams and the pounding. Later the same night, she needed to use the restroom again, but she was still too traumatized to go alone, so she woke up her older sibling to help walk with her. They have no issue with this, and they both make their way to the restroom. And as she's using the restroom, they both begin to hear the cries once again, and they both walk back into the house and wake up their parents. Angered at first, but since it was the older sibling who was hearing the cries as well, the mum and dad left as if they knew what was going on. The dad goes to his brother's house down the lane, and he wakes up his family member. It took quite a while until they were able to dig where the coffin was, but as they opened it, they saw that he was laying on his stomach now. The dad and his brother quickly turned the body over to his back, and they all screamed at what they saw. There, they saw their relative covered in bloody claw marks all over his face, neck, and arms. All along the coffin walls, they saw pounding marks and claw marks. It haunted my family knowing that they had buried him alive. He was now for sure dead due to most likely either a heart attack or from the lack of oxygen. My family doesn't know why he appeared to be dead when they first buried him. Most likely due to the one sickness where someone appears to be dead, but in reality they're just in a coma-like state. Back when I was 18, my friends and I decided to go on a trip to some rural area to relax on our own for a couple of days. Luckily, my late grandparents owned a medium-sized house in a remote village, and there are plenty of those where I'm from. So I got the keys from my dad, and we packed food, water, and a first aid kit, and we headed out. It was a 2-hour ride from the closest city to get there. The car dropped us off in the middle of nowhere and told us to walk in a straight line until we get to the village. After about 30 minutes of walking, we reached our destination, and it was nothing fancy, let me tell you, but the village was definitely bigger than expected. Dogs, chickens, and goats roamed around freely. I was a city boy, so that sight was a first for me. But we got to my grandparents' house, settled in, We spent the first day of it just resting and decided to go to a spot that my father told me about tomorrow morning. We headed out at daybreak and we packed plenty of water. The spot was close by, so we didn't think to pack any food. After about a 30-minute walk, I would say, in the middle of a heavily wooded mountain, mind you, we finally got to our destination. It was a beautiful area too, with a huge tree and an amazing view, but it wasn't enough for the 5 young idiots who came there to explore, right? So we kept moving forward, just looking around and having fun. But without realizing it, we'd spent like an extra 1.5 hours up there. We were exhausted and, more importantly, we were hungry, so we decided to head back. We followed the trail, but we never really reached that big tree again, even after like an hour of fast walking. We began to panic a bit and went from fast walking to jogging, but for some reason, even though we should have been backtracking, we didn't make it to the tree again. And it was there that we spotted an old woman walking the trail. We quickly approached her, said hello, and asked how close was the village. She looked at us weirdly and told us that we were walking the opposite way this whole time and that the village was like a 3-hour walk away. We were super exhausted by that point. 3 of us could barely stand, let alone walk for 3 hours. We explained to the old woman about our situation after she asked us, and she offered us to rest at her place, and apparently it was close by. Get a meal so we can get home safely. One of my friends, Adam, and I protested that it might be a bad idea to follow a stranger, even though we were in a rough situation. But between the hunger and the state of the others, we gave in and agreed. We followed her towards her cabin, small with a tiny garden in front of it and a goat tied to a post next to the door. Overall, it was nothing out of the ordinary, to be honest, not in these parts of the country anyway. We got in, sat down on these long sofas with no back support. She told us to wait while she got us some food. The cabin was surprisingly very clean. The tables, the chairs, the sofas were obviously old and worn out, but not dusty, and overall the place looked really welcoming, to be honest. However, Adam and I didn't fully drop our guard while the others were simply happy that they got a soft thing to sit on. 15 minutes later, she came out from the kitchen with 2 big plates of chicken and vegetables. There was a plate of salad and some olive oil, and she poured us some tea, and we dug in as she went back to the kitchen to prepare more. I was considering not eating at first, at least until I saw the others ate, and they're still good, but my hunger took over and I went right into it as soon as the plates hit the table. Adam, however, didn't. He didn't lay a finger on the food, nor the tea. He was really paranoid. He was always the most fit out of all of us, so he managed to hold back. She brought us 2 more plates of food that we cleaned up pretty quickly. She brought more tea and told us to rest and digest the food, and leave whenever we felt like it. She then excused herself and she went to her room to sleep as she was tired of cooking. We got to relaxing and drifted off one by one to sleep as I set an alarm clock to ring after 30 minutes so we could move then, and I was the last one to drift off, talking to Adam, who said that he was going to stay awake and look around for a bit before we move. And after that, all I remember is going to sleep. I was shook awake though by my friends who suddenly looked worried. I snapped awake after I saw their faces and I looked around and asked them what was going on. One of them points out the window and tells me to look. I didn't get it at first, but then I noticed. It was sunrise. I almost had a heart attack. I thought that we'd overslept for a whole day, but man, it was so much worse. Adam was nowhere to be found. We went out of the cabin and called, but there was no answer, so I went back in to ask the old woman. I knocked on the door to the room that she went in before I fell asleep, but I got no response. The door wasn't locked though, so I decided to excuse myself and go in, and when I did, it was the first time since I went on this trip that I was now in full panic mode. Because in that room, there was no bed. In fact, there was nothing. Like, nothing at all. Just 4 walls and a door. The kitchen was the same as well. I ran to my phone to try and call Adam, The signal there was weak, but it still worked, but my phone was off. Dead battery. But it was around 70% when I fell asleep, so that didn't make any sense. All our phones were dead, so we got out and we started running on the trail towards the village while calling Adam's name. After a while, we met some people from the village, my grandparents' neighbours, and they looked almost scared when they saw us. And then they dropped this bomb on all of us. Where have you guys been for the past 3 days? I was shocked, to say the least. Apparently, I'd been missing for 3 days. My parents got concerned because I didn't answer the phone and called those neighbours to ask about me. They even reported me missing to the authorities. The whole village was looking for us for 2 days, apparently, and we asked for help to find Adam, but after we told them about what happened, they took us to the local mosque so the imam could look into it. They thought that it was witchcraft. We went back there the next day with the same men from the village looking for Adam. We showed them the cabin and its